In my never-ending quest to paint up every Space Marine chapter under the sun, I have arrived at a relative newcomer to the world of 40k, and that is the Sons of the Phoenix. Noble in action and aspect, loyal to the core, and always followed around by a group of pilgrims who just want to catch a glimpse of the pretty Space Marines in their pink-white bedazzled armor. Obviously, I am describing a successor of the Imperial Fists. That's definitely the whole story, and don't look into it. Breaking into my collection of Intercessor Space Marine sprues, I found an old Indomita sprue. These old monopose Space Marines are not as static as they appear, and they have some more dynamic running poses than are found in the regular Assault Intercessor sprue. Sticking this model together, I nipped off the arm pegs so I can swap in some alternative weapons. The Sons of the Phoenix are expert swordsmen and particularly fond of flames, so a power sword and hand flamer feel appropriate. And I especially like these cutlass power swords that are sharp on one side. They remind me of the dueling sabers from the Emperor's Children. Not that this guy has anything to do with the Emperor's Children. I stuck on some shoulder pads and a helmet, and I finally put on the backpack, and my little Imperial Fist successor is ready for action. Now in the lore, the Sons of the Phoenix are canonically a successor chapter of the Imperial Fist, created during the Ultima founding. With that said, everything about them does feel very Emperor's Children-y, right down to the name. The Sons of the Phoenix, well in 40k, who's the Phoenix? It's Fulgrim, he's the Palatine Phoenix. They're so Emperor's Children-y that Sean even collects them. You remember Sean? He's a filthy Emperor's Children player. Now, is it possible that the Sons of the Phoenix could be Imperial Fist in name, but Emperor's Children in gene seed? It is technically possible. It is rumored that at the end of the Horus Heresy, a lot of the Loyalist holdouts in traitor legions were inducted into the Ultramarines and Imperial Fists because they were still loyal. And so it is possible that there's a little bit of Fulgrim floating around in the Imperial Fist gene stock. What might be a little bit more likely is that Archmagos Dominus Call is untrustworthy and just does whatever he wants, and so he just used Emperor's Children gene seed because he wanted to, and then slapped the Imperial Fist logo right on top of his new Marines. Or maybe they in fact are Imperial Fists, who just really like to wear pink and bedazzle their armor. And speaking of bedazzling, I have a couple of ideas of how to spice this little sucker up. One thing the Sons of the Phoenix are known for is having holy candles on their armor, and I have an idea of how to make these. I mixed up some green stuff, then I took some electronic wire. It helps if it's solid wire and not braided for the strength. I carefully stripped the end of some of these, leaving me with a little shielding and a little bit sticking out, like I have some scaled dynamites. Now to attach these. I shoved some green stuff in little patches onto his shoulders, and I nipped the ends of the dynamites a little shorter, and then I dripped them in super glue and pressed them into the putty. I used the round end of my sculpting tool to smear the green stuff onto the candles and backpack, so it looks like the gooey drippings of candle wax, and I added another one. I want them all candled up. I have my wax and I have my wicks. I trimmed them a little bit shorter. I found it easier to leave them long so I could actually hold them, and then trimming them when they were in place. And to make the fire, I took a hot glue gun and dipped the end of the wire into the molten glue, pulling it away slowly so that I was left with a little drip of glue. I nipped off the glue strands once they got thin, and I gave them a quick blast with my hairdryer to remelt the tips so that the clean cutoff from my nippers turned into a nice round end. I think these look pretty good, and they were really easy, barely an inconvenience. Now onto the base. I prepared a Cobalt Keep 32mm magnet base, and I got to work decorating the top. I glued down some 1/2 inch cork, and then I cut this in half, leaving me with some nice natural looking rock, and I flipped my mini upside down and drilled a 1mm brass rod, shoving it up into his leg and then stabbing him into the base with lots of thick super glue. With one of his legs so far back on the base, I have a lot of room in the front, so I decided to stick down a little friend, a skull on the base to keep him company. I covered some of the low spots and anywhere that the plastic base top was showing through with some texture paste, and I piled this up against the skull so he looks a little bit submerged into the ground. Then I gave the whole mini a black prime. The texture paste isn't dry yet, but I think I can keep going. I won't tell if you don't. After a black prime, I hit the whole mini with a nice light blue-green color. Spraying this over the black will really let me control how bright he gets, and it'll leave a little bit of that original black in the deepest recesses. I hit him extra hard on top and let just a little bit of that primer show through on the bottom and in between his legs. Now I want to give him a wash, but I want to finish out the base coatings first. I put gunmetal paint on the in-between parts of his armor, on his pouches and weapons, and then I switched to a gold paint and I put this on all of the trim, on his Imperialis, backpack ball, and the handle of his sword. Now he is a very crispy and clean little not Emperor's child. I mixed up a wash of a dark blue speed paint that I super thin with a lot of speed paint medium. I only want this color in the corners and recesses. I don't want it to tint the model much darker. Once that was dry, I can keep on speed painting. This model is so light, tinting will work like a dream. I took some purple speed paint and put this over his right shoulder and arm. I also used this color on the candles. Once that had dried, I gave the bottom of each element a second coat to make the color a little darker and more saturated. And speaking of saturated, I broke out the magenta paint and I got to edge highlighting. I painted this around his hand and the top of his arm, and I also put a blob of this on the top of his shoulder and the candles. I mixed a little bright pink in my magenta and did a further highlight. Having this color go from dark purple to a light pink makes it look incredibly vibrant and shiny. Once the armor and candles were looking good, I did more edge highlighting using a white paint on the rest of his light blue armor. I feel like this would be a really good recipe also for Space Wolves. I edge highlighted all the easy spots to reach on the armor, and I decided to make one of his knee pads purple as well, giving it the same magenta and pink treatment to finish off the armor for my Sons of the Phoenix. You know, now that this guy's coming together, he's kinda reminding me of something. These are some of Sean's Emperor's Children model. Definitely nothing to see here. This guy is an Imperial Fist through and through. Look at this guy. He looks like he's getting ready to build a trench. I can see why Sons of the Phoenix are kind of a popular chapter, even though they're so new. I know Simon over at Zumakito is painting up an army, and Sean is trying to collect an army of these guys. It's a really good color scheme. The light blue-white armor is really, really striking, and it's got just the right amount of pink. That arm is a lovely little accent that is really fun to paint, because you only gotta paint a little bit of it. Any more pink and it would be a little bit of a pain. Now I've got the lion's share of this guy done, it is time to work on the little details. For those candle flames, I gave them a coat of yellow speed paint, then I painted the tails with some orange speed paint. And towards the tips, I hit these with red. I put a little drop of white paint into the belly of each flame to make the brightest spots, and these candles came together quick. Now for those eyes. Sons of the Phoenix typically have yellow eyes, which would match the candle flames nicely, but I decided to do them in green, to further accentuate the Emperor's childreniness of them. And I plan on using green for the power sword too. The blade is already gunmetal, and I used some dark blue speed paint to quickly glaze on some non-metallic metal, brushing this on the top and bottom, and then quickly feathering it out with a clean brush. Then I used silver paint on the edge of the blade. I came back in and dripped some watery green paint along the power cord, and I hit the tip a few extra times to make it look like it was glowing green. Now the sword is done, time for the business end of the hand flamer. I love this weapon. I rarely take it because anyone who can hold a hand flamer can also hold a plasma pistol, which is just a much better gun, but it's cool. I took some brown speed paint and did a few coats toward the tip of the gun, making the gold metal look like it was all burnt up at the business end. The Sons of the Phoenix are definitely not Emperor's Children, but if I was putting together an army of these suckers, I would definitely want to go the close combat route. I'd be very tempted to put together some squads of Blade Guard veteran with attached Judiciaries. I used to say Justicars, because I feel like the hard consonant, it sounds a lot tougher, but no, it's Judiciar, according to Games Workshop. And I still think I said that wrong. The Blade Guard Veteran are an all-around excellent close combat unit for the Space Marines, and the attached Judiciar makes them into an unstoppable melee powerhouse because it grants them fights first. And fights first doesn't what it says on the tin, it makes you fight first. It basically means that the squad has to be taken out at range. You can't face it in close combat because you will get punched. And it's a pretty small squad, so it's kind of easy to maneuver and hopefully not get shot at range. If I really wanted to build an Emperor's Children Space Marine army, I might even dip into some of those new Victrix Honor Guard the Ultramarines have. It would be very blasphemous, but to make those guys into essentially Loyalist Flawless Blades, that would be an incredibly powerful melee army. Honestly, it would be way better than an actual Emperor's Children army. Don't tell Sean, but Flawless Blades are kinda eh. The next step on my not quite an Imperial Fist are the chapter symbols. Oh, and he's also got a purity seal on his leg. I quickly picked out the purity seal, using some tan for the papers and red for the wax. I did 2 quick rounds of highlighting, mixing white into the tan for highlights on the paper and taking the black paint out of the red so I could get more saturated highlights. Now to figure out the symbols. The right shoulder is easy, classic tactical squad markings. I took a white arrow from the Space Marine decal sheet, and once I got it on there, I used some more micro sole to soften the decal so I could really crush it down and make it conform to the roundness of the shoulder. But you know what always conforms nicely to shoulders? That's right, EonsOfBattle.com. On our website, we have all kinds of hobby goodies like army painter paints, brushes, wet palettes, cork, decals, basing toppers and bits, and we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit, good for any one terrain pack we have ever made or the brand new one. Our new terrain for December, the Bubble City. Embrace your inner amphibian with this alien encampment, a truly unique series of aquatic structures like the Bubble House, Bubble Command Center, and Bubble Fortress. And it's not just buildings, it also has some powerful defenses in the turret and the shield walls. Get ready to get immersed in some underwater goodness, perfect for all the popular war games. Now for the chapter symbol, and look at this. Who could paint this? A helmet with a halo and an Aquila wing. I don't even want to try. I looked through my entire collection of decals trying to find something that was close, and funny enough, on the Cerastus Knight decal sheet, there's this. It's not quite the same thing, but it is a face with a spiky halo and wings. This is way closer than I thought I would get. I had to do a little surgery to make the wing smaller so that it would fit on a Space Marine shoulder pad, but once I got it on there, I really like it. The gold fits in perfectly with the trim. Now that the symbol is sorted, it's time for the base, and he's got a lot of lovely coldness in his armor, so I think a really nice warm saturated base will look great. I loaded up the base with an orangey brown, and I mixed in a little bit of white into the color to do some highlighting on the skull. Now for the final touch. I took some yellow pigment powders, and I took a clean dry brush, and I dusted this onto the base, using a stamping motion to shove the powders into the nooks and crannies of the cork and texture paste. A few puffs of my airbrush blew away the excess, and I was left with a very vibrant, natural looking base for my little legionary. The only thing left was to paint the rim of the base black. The Sons of the Phoenix, a very dapper little Space Marine chapter. This would be a really fun way to play Loyalist Emperor's Children. It'd also be a really weird way to play the Imperial Fists. I'm definitely gonna have to remember the candle trick for next time because I think it was pretty effective and it was pretty easy to do. I kinda wanna try again with my low temp glue gun if I can ever find it, because I feel like with the low temp, I'll be able to get a bigger flame ball on the end of the candlestick, but my regular high temp one, it did a pretty good job. And I think because it's so rubbery and squishy, that these are gonna stand up a little bit better to gaming and not get broken. All in all, a very effective Space Marine color scheme. Let me know in the comments below, what Space Marine chapter should I take a look at next?